Hi, I'm Larry McReynolds. This is my home track, Talladega Superspeedway, and we are here at the Super Stretch RV Campground right against the backstretch where these cars will be running 190 miles per hour. I've done a lot of podcasts. I'm not sure I've ever done one in an RV. I'm doing it with a guy named Butterbean. All right, Butterbean, get ready. America's crew chief's here. Let's do this.
Hey everybody, we're back with episode 14 of the Bean Nation podcast presented by Clear 28. This one's going to be super exciting. We got America's crew chief, Larry McReynolds on, and we're in Alabama at Talladega, which is really cool, I feel like, because Larry is from Alabama, so we're going to get right into it. So Larry, I am super honored to have you here. This is something that I feel like as a kid, I would have never thought I'd be sitting here talking to you because I grew up, obviously, watching you. I want to go over the start. So I did a little digging, did my homework. So you were a crew chief from 85 to 2000. Is that correct?
That is correct.
23 cup wins.
Correct.
21 poles, 122 top fives, and 209 top tens.
I'm pretty impressed. You did your homework, for sure.
After watching you for years, and you always have the analytics, I had to.
But I love the fact about the 23 wins, but I'm always very honest with people. I started 470, so that means I lost 447 races. So sometimes I'm not sure if that's a good stat or not.
I always tell people, they compare it to football and stuff, and I say, in racing, you're never going to go above 500. Like, that's not what we're looking for. But I felt like when I was reading those stats, like, it's impressive. And I guess to start, I wanted to ask you, like, hearing that, what does that, I guess, if you go back to the beginning of the whole career and everything, but like sitting here after it's done, retired from crew chiefing, how does that make you feel to, see that? Because it's hard to win one race.
It is. Maybe I'm a little bit prejudiced, but to me, to win a NASCAR Cup Series race is one of the hardest things to do in all of motorsports. And to be able to do it 23 times, obviously the 2 Daytona 500s will always stick with me the rest of my life. But one thing that I'm proud of is I was able to do it with 3 different organizations, and I think the number is 6 different drivers. So that's very fulfilling
impressive.
right there. That's, and even if you look at Mike Skinner, who was the last driver I worked with, we did everything but win a Cup Series race, but we did win the last time we went to Japan in 1998 over there at Motegi. So I know that doesn't fall into the stats of wins because it was an exhibition race, but at least was able to win a race with Mike.
We'll bump it to 24.
Okay.
I mean,
I like that.
That's cool to hear about the Japan race because I was born in 97. So that's
great.
Around.
Great. That makes me feel really young.
I don't feel young in this side anymore because they're way younger. But that's around when the Japan thing was going on. So that's interesting to hear you think about or talk about it because I didn't particularly get to watch all that. But that's cool to have that. And I'm like, how many people? Was that a 1-year thing or?
It was a 3-year deal. It was 96, 97, and 98. And it was a deal that Bill France Jr. made with the folks over there in Japan. And it was kind of by invite only. They took, I don't remember the exact number. They took maybe half the Cup Series teams. They also invited a few what used to be the Winston West teams, which was kind of the Cup Series on the West Coast. And again, we went to Suzuka, Japan, 96, 97, the road course where the F1 cars run. And then year 3, 98, we went to the oval over there in Motegi.
Wow, that's pretty cool because they don't do stuff like that nowadays. Is like I haven't seen it.
Schedule is almost too intense to do it. Yeah,
that's right.
Like each one of those years, in the first 2 years I was with Robert Yates Racing in the 28 car, and we went both years. And then 98 with RCR. We ran over there, I think it may have been the week before Thanksgiving, but we had to load all of our stuff in a container, and it had to leave the shop like mid-October. So it was a pretty big undertaking. Yeah, they went over on a ship.
Man, so I worked at the port, so
yeah,
I can relate to what goes into it on that level. And I didn't even have this in my notes. We're getting kind of going down this rabbit hole now, but to think about it, was that where y'all were putting them on, just like a cargo ship like that, and they get unloaded at the docks?
Yeah, they had a tractor trailer pick the containers up there at the shop. I think they may have went to the port of Charleston or somewhere. I don't remember exactly. Wow. And then they went by ship over to Japan, and we did not get our stuff back. It was close to the holidays when we finally got everything back. But honestly, when I look back at that win at Motegi, you know, I'm a type of guy, I don't care what race it is. I look at it as the most important race, whatever the next one is. And I think there was a lot of teams that were kind of mailing that race in. We're just going to send this car. We're not using that car. I'm telling you, we were all in.
It was like a normal
going over there to
Motegi.
We took one of our current cars that we were not planning on racing the rest of the year. But the biggest thing we did is there was nobody did any testing over there. You know, Goodyear took a really hard tire to be conservative. And I was trying to figure out where to even start with the setup. So Rick Reineman, who was Al Unser Jr.'s crew chief for Penske, Rick and I had a relationship because we did a Snap-on tool promotion together. So I got to know Rick. And I knew the Indy cars had been to Motegi. So, in fact, this is the one track Danica Patrick won a race at. Okay. So, yeah. So I called Rick as we were getting prepared, and I said, Rick, you know, you guys go to Japan to Motegi. I said, can you just tell me, is there a track in the country, a track we go to that's close to it? And he thought a minute. He said, well, there is one, but he said, you guys don't race there. And he said, Homestead Miami Speedway. I went, wait, no, we haven't raced there, but we have tested our ass off there. That's where we developed one of the new Monte Carlos. I said, we have been there. Wow. He said, go, basically like, this was the old Homestead before the reconfiguration. He said, go like you went to Homestead. And then we were about ready to hang up. And he said, one other thing, but this didn't come from me because remember, I work for Roger Penske, and Penske have a car over there. If you can figure out how to shift, you will wear them out. I went, perfect. So I went straight to our drive tank guy, right? And we talked about it, and we built an overdrive transmission to go over there, and you would shift twice a lap. And I remember going to Earnhardt and Kevin Hamlin, his crew chief, and say, look, we're gonna shift over there. Earnhardt said, I ain't shifting on no oval. It's like, okay, I'm just telling you, we're gonna shift. And when we got over there, guess what the first thing that Earnhardt was looking for? A transmission he could shift with. Didn't have it.
Wow. So I love that because that's an added bonus to this episode of stuff I didn't know. Like, super cool. I remember hearing about the Japan stuff. Like, I wish I was around in that time era because I love the history of the sport. But another fact, before I go to the beginning of how you got into racing, because I feel like I have to ask that, your first win, and this was a really cool one that I thought of because of where I'm from. Your first Cup win was with Ricky Rudd
at Watkins Glen. Yep, the road course.
And he's from Chesapeake. I'm from Chesapeake. So
okay,
I had never met him, but I didn't know, and I didn't realize you had won your first one with Ricky. So I thought that was a really cool fact. Is there anything unique about working with him and getting that? Because your first one's special. So that.
Well, honestly, with Ricky, when you would go to especially a road course or a short track, especially a road course, I knew the only group that could beat us if we beat ourselves. And, you know, we were not going to Sonoma in 1988. We didn't go to Sonoma to 1989, but we had been to Riverside in June of 88. It was the last year we went to Riverside, and we actually sat on the pole with a new track record, obviously a track record, and that'll never be broken because that was the last race there. And I botched some strategy. What I was trying to do is what teams do today at road courses. I was trying to run the race backwards, but I got too aggressive and I pitted way too early, and we just never could make the ground back up. So we go to Watkins Glen, second road course race, because Ricky didn't start driving that car till 1988. And him and Rusty Wallace had one heck of a battle. But the biggest two things about that win, Butterbean, was one, my wife and I were trying to start a family. And when I left the shop on Thursday before we flew to Watkins Glen, I went home to have lunch and to clean up, to go back to the airport. And she said, I want to sit down and talk to you about something while we have our lunch. Okay. And she told us she was pregnant. We were pregnant with our first child, Brooke, our oldest daughter. and then to go and win Watkins Glen 3 days later.
All at the
It's a
same
pretty
time.
overwhelming weekend. But the other unique thing about it, when I made the decision to leave Birmingham in 1980 to pursue a NASCAR career, I needed a neutral person to tell me this was okay for me to do. You know, my mom and dad were kind of against it, you know, but they didn't want me to leave Birmingham. So I went to see Donnie Allison out at his late model shop in Hueytown.
And I just met him this weekend.
He's a piece of work.
And guess what he was telling me? He gave me a saying about road course racing. It was something about all gas, no brakes, or something. He told me out there when I was.
He's got a lot of philosophies. But let me guess. Was he standing that close to you when he was telling you?
Yeah, actually, well, kind of. We were sitting, and then I didn't want to make him get up, but he stood up to take a photo with me. But that's just ironic. You bring up Donnie because I literally just got in the Hall of Fame here. But
thank the world of the whole Allison family. They're like family to me. So I went out to Donnie's because I didn't really know Davey. I really didn't know Bobby, but I knew Donnie. And I went out there, and I remember chasing him around his late model at his late model shop for about 15 minutes. And he finally said, "What can I do for you?" And I told him what I wanted to do. And Donnie being Donnie, again, he got about that close to my face and poked me in the chest the whole time. He said, "I tell you what, boy, you need to go do it." But he said, "I'll tell you one damn thing. That checkered flag y'all got out there at BIR, the local short track with a super late model a few weeks ago, you better go find that checkered flag because it'll be a long damn time before you ever see another one." And as I was walking from the pits to Victory Lane, Donnie Allison was the first person I thought about. It's like, damn, he was right. It took 8 years.
On the Ricky Rudd win. He was that is too cool. So obviously you mentioned growing up in Birmingham, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Talladega's special being down here. What makes you kind of touched on it. You were doing some stuff, smaller stuff before NASCAR, but like, what was the decision? Like, you're going to go get into racing? Because people it's not normal really. Like, you know, like everybody back home plays a different sport or goes and works a real job. I joke about it because I love what we get to do, but everybody has kind of the same story of how they end up in it, but like, what was the day you're like, this is what I want to go try and do? Or
yeah, I mean, probably the Cliff Note version, and you know this as well as anybody, racing, no matter what you do, whether you work on them, build engines, drive them, we know it's a disease and it gets in your bloodstream and there is no getting it out. And I'd been working on these late models as a volunteer, made no money whatsoever. I'd graduated from high school, didn't go to college. I was working in a junkyard Monday through Friday and racing on the weekends with a guy by the name of Bobby Ray Jones that owned the late model that I was working on. And for probably 2+ years after I got out of high school, I'd go to that junkyard and work all day long, leave there, run through a drive-through, go to his shop that was probably 30 minutes from the junkyard, work sometimes all night long, quit just in time enough to maybe go catch a shower to go back to the junkyard.
Man.
And then I was starting to take Fridays off because we were starting to do 2 or 3 races a weekend. And again, making no money whatsoever doing it. And
just for the love of it.
I did it for 2.5 years, and I went, you know, my life's going to be pretty short if I continue doing this. And about the time I was really feeling like, how can I bust into NASCAR? It's not going to happen in Birmingham, more than likely. Well, I was a member of NASCAR because some of the tracks we ran the late model was NASCAR tracks, so I had to have a NASCAR license. And NASCAR used to send out a little newsletter every month. And on the back side of that newsletter were classifieds. And it may be somebody trying to sell a trailer, sell an engine, sell a race car. Well, I just happened to flip this one over. This would have been probably July of 1980. And the bottom classified said, "New NASCAR Cup Series team starting in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh, wow.
Call this number." I called it. And actually, it was a local businessman in Greenville that was starting a Cup team. And his buddy that he ran late models for him was going to drive it, Don Sprouse. Bob Rogers was the owner. Don Sprouse was the driver. So I actually talked to his daughter that was kind of putting this race team together for her dad. And we talked, and she actually knew who I was because we had raced against them through some late model races. So we talked 10 or 15 minutes. And she said, well, give me your number. We'll get back to you. And, Butterbean, I hung up and I said, I'm probably one of about 1 million people that's
We've
called
all
them.
done that, right?
And I said,
that ain't gonna happen.
but I tried. So, we didn't have cell phones or nothing back then. And I was still living at home. Got home one evening from the junkyard, and my mom said, hey, Larry, there's a girl by the name of Dana Williamson from Greenville, South Carolina that called you and left the number. I went, what? So I called her the next day.
It's like a lottery ticket.
Oh my gosh. It's like I couldn't even believe it. So it was late in the evening. So I waited the next day and called her, and she said, we'd love for you to at least come up and give it a whirl and see if you like us and see if we like you. And so September of 1980, I loaded my little 1971 green Pinto. When I say green, I mean really green.
Yeah, I love
hooked a U-Haul behind it.
That was a sight.
Honestly, well, it started dragging the ground before I put anything in the U-Haul.
And I mean, we don't really. It would have been so cool nowadays to have a photo of that, right?
It looked like a V.
Man!
And that was before I put anything in it. And my mom and dad stood there and looked at me and said, "This is the craziest thing we've ever seen. You'll be back in 6 months.
That's what I was wondering. How
you'll be broke and you'll be hungry. We'll feed you, but we're not going to bail you out of debt." And I said, you know what? You're probably right. I always respect what y'all have told me, but I got to go try this.
You can't go your whole life and go, what if?
No.
That's kind of how I got to my spot was when I left my job at the port was I can't go 20 years and look back and go, if I didn't do that, like you don't know if it's going to work or not. But you go, if I don't take that chance, I'll never know.
I can always go back to work in the junkyard.
That was my thought process. So it's awesome to hear you had the same, which a lot of us have in the racing world. But literally, I have been there just in this 2020 time.
A lot of people. It's a long list.
It is. So that's really cool. And you didn't ever drive?
Never drove. I never had a desire to drive. I just enjoyed working on them. The thought never crossed my mind to drive.
The reason I say that is because I have so much respect for the men and women nowadays in the sport, but just the driver always gets the interview, the spotlight. They're up there, and I always tell, at least on my side of the network, I'm always like, I'm only here because of these people. It's when I go home and those guys are still at the shop, away from their families, and knowing that like they're doing all that work and they're not even going to get to hold the steering wheel. And I respect that so much. Not that I feel guilty, but I just really appreciate what they do and guys like you in the sport, because it's hard as being a driver. The way I want to say this is it's hard for me. I like working on them too. I don't have to anymore now, which it was weird at first,
right? Because
I did late model racing, but it would be hard for me now to go, all right, I'm going to go on that side and not miss drive. So I always wondered that. So
there were times throughout my crew chief career, I wished I would have driven just where I could maybe relate a little more to what I was being told. Exactly. Some of the best in the business in the Cup garage, Rodney Childers, Paul Wolf, Coleman Presley, Spots for Joy. That's the only time I regretted, but trust me, you didn't want me driving, because going home tonight, you'll probably see me going up I-85, and I'm probably the guy in the left lane with my blinker on, probably running about 10 miles an hour under the speed limit.
With Brandon trying to push you out of the way, right? I convoyed with Brandon down here, so it was quite a trip.
Oh boy,
he was on the loud pedal, but all right. So I'm gonna kind of move over to another subject, not to bring up negative or sad, but you went through a lot in your career we all have highs and lows, but how did you handle the loss of Davey? And then there's kind of a two-parter to this question, but you have that tragic event happen, probably in his biggest prime, winning championship contender. You had that happen, and then you get Irvin, and he's got shots at it, and then he gets hurt, right? the second year, or was it
August of 94. Davey was killed July of 93, and Ernie got hurt in August of 94, right about a year.
So where I'm going with this, I guess, is, you handle a loss of a best friend, your race car driver, then your next guy gets hurt. How do you go through that and not give up?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking it's one thing somebody gets hurt and out of the car, but you lose one, and it's like nothing's going right. Like, y'all, how do you not lose the love of the sport? How do you tell yourself to keep going, if that makes sense of how I'm
and there's even a one that goes deeper back than that, further back than that. In 1985, I was working for a very small team in Greenville, South Carolina, owned by the man by the name of Bobby Hawkins, and we had built a double throwdown Cup Series short track car for Butch Lindley.
Okay.
And we were getting ready to go run Wilkesboro and Martinsville. And right before we were going to go test Wilkesboro with this brand new car, Butch went to Bradenton, Florida, to DeSoto Speedway, which is now the track that Cletus owns, the Freedom Factory.
I've raced there.
And broke a trailing arm and hit the wall and was in a coma for 6-7 years.
Wow.
So it even goes back before the Davy, and Butch and I were really good friends. So 1993, you buckle as a crew chief or crew member, you buckle your driver in the race car every single weekend, and there's a risk
every time.
But the last thing you expect is to get a phone call on Monday afternoon after a race weekend that your driver has been seriously injured in a helicopter crash, which we know he passed away just a few hours later. And the thing that was tough about Davey is not only was he the driver that I was working with, that I was having a ton of success with, he was truly my best friend.
That's right.
I mean, my absolute best friend. Our relationship as a driver crew chief was small.
You could never race again and would have been best friends. And that's the best,
absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, our wives were good friends. Our families were very similar in age. In fact, Brandon, Davey and Liz had a son real close to Brandon's age, Robbie. We had Brandon. We actually had the boys baptized together at Charlotte Motor Speedway at the Speedway Club in October of 91. And Linda and I are Robbie's godparents, and Davey and Liz, Brandon's godparents. So, when that happened, I truly did a lot of reflecting. Do I want to keep going?
So you thought about quitting.
Oh, you have no idea. When we left...
Is that before Ernie's wreck
yes,
too? So this is
absolutely,
after Davey.
Yeah, because we went to Birmingham. He was killed on July 13th on a Monday, and we flew to Birmingham and, of course, had his funeral on that Thursday. In Pocono, Pennsylvania was that weekend. Robert, myself, we all made the decision we're not going to run Pocono. It would not be fair to any driver that we put in that race car. Now, I'm sure Davey was pretty pissed at us about not going to Pocono and racing, but he's not the one that was down here having to deal with this.
That's right.
And we just took the weekend off. I did not watch the Pocono race, and my wife, Linda, and I did a lot of reflecting.
You just kind of disconnected from it.
And it finally dawned on me that Davey Allison, he was the most strong-willed individual I think I ever been around in my life. And he had a little saying that there's nothing that can come my way that God and I can't handle together. And that's what I hung my hat on and picked up the pieces, and we moved on. And to your point, we never got over the loss of Davey, but the best medicine in the world was putting Davey Allison in that 28 car. He started driving it at the Southern 500 at Darlington of 93. And 3 races later, Martinsville, we sat on the pole and led, I think, 412 of the 500 laps. 1 week later, went to Charlotte, sat on the outside the front row, and led 328 of 334 laps. The hurt was still there, but at least you've said, we're back.
That's right.
We've recovered from this. Spin it ahead now, basically less than a year later, we're sitting on top of the world again. We are winning races, sitting on poles, leading laps, battling the 3 car for the championship. Same deal again. When you least expect it, in a Saturday morning practice.
Yeah, not
even in the race.
In the race.
Not that would have made it any
That's right.
easier or better, but
It's the
A
least of your
10-lap
concern.
run. I
That's gonna
remember
happen.
every detail about it. We just had made a 10-lap run, and I knew we were not where we needed to be. I felt like when the practice started, we were going to be too tight. But I said, go run 10 laps, and let's see where we're at. Ernie was notorious for if you wanted to run 10 laps or 20 laps, he'd run that number of laps, and then he'd haul ass through 1 and 2 one last time. And when he hauled ass through 1 and 2 one more time, we blew a right front tire, and he hit the wall. And of course, he was out for, a year and a quarter. Yes, trust me. I wanted to
So you're circling
really walk
back,
away again,
like, to those thoughts again.
but I was not going to give it up. And, I made a promise. Once we knew, we didn't even know if Ernie was going to survive, much
right.
less be back driving a race car. Driving a race car is the furthest thing from our mind. We just want our guy back. And once we knew he was going to recover, I made the promise to him. He was still in the hospital. He was scared. What's going to happen with my car? And Robert and I both told him, we don't know what we're going to do between now and then, but when you come back, that's your race car. That is your race car. And you mentioned the 23 wins, probably a win, not a Daytona 500, not the first win, but probably one of the most fulfilling wins is when he came back in July of 96, we won Loudon, New Hampshire. I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. I remember walking in the media center and I said, ladies and gentlemen, come back complete, because he's back to victory lane.
And that's a rewarding moment.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
'cause
And then we followed it up, I think about a month or a month and a half later, and won Richmond.
It's when I think about it, obviously I wasn't born yet, but I love the history.
You continue to tell me that.
I do. I got to throw it in there. But reason I'm saying that is because I love the history and going back and watching stuff before I was around, just because I'm like, man, I feel like I'd have fit in so good in that time era. And obviously it's so different nowadays. This, like, it's still racing, but the sport has evolved in keeping up with the times, I guess, right?
Oh yeah.
Safer cars aren't like they were, obviously. But I feel like last year driving a 28 car, I did a lot of reflecting on Davey, because I got a lot of his fans that like the 28. So I never really thought about it as much. And then I remember winning Daytona last year and rolling in there in the 28 car. And even though it's not Cup or whatever, it's still Daytona.
Still the 28 was still Daytona.
That's right. And people were saying stuff to me about, like, man, it's awesome to see a 28 in victory lane. And then I started like doing a little digging on my own. So the only reason I didn't want to bring up sad subject,
sure,
but I wanted to know, because
but it's definitely part of the journey.
That's right. And after knowing what I know now and driving a 28, I'm like, man, like, I wish I could have met Davey, right?
Yeah.
It's somebody that people ask you, like, if you can go back, who would you want to meet? And, I've got a bunch from that era that aren't here anymore, but like, I think driving a 28 car made me feel like I was carrying a legacy for the 28 number, So it was really cool to do that. And the reason I asked about not giving up is because if you'd have gave up, you wouldn't have done the next thing I want to ask you about, is the 500 win with Dale.
Yeah.
So like, if you toss in the towel, it might have been a domino effect. Dale might not ever win that race, right?
I just happened to be the lucky guy in place when it all came together, though.
I know, but I mean, no matter what happens in life, like, that moment is so iconic in our sport. And, is there anything about that's special? I mean, I know it's special, but that's a cool fact that you would share? Or
yeah,
I mean, that's a
it was my second 500 win. I'd won it 6 years earlier with Davey, but I don't, whether you win 1, 2, or like
that's right,
Richard Petty 7, they all are pretty darn special, because it's such a hard race to win. You only get one shot a year. But we had built that car actually during the summer of 1997. We'd probably been down here to Talladega 3 or 4 times before the 97 season even ended and tested it. We'd probably been to the wind tunnel 3 or 4 times. Dale never drove it for the first time until the January test of 98. Dave Marcus and Mike Dillon did all the testing here for us. And there was just something about that car. We almost cut the body off before we ever raced it because the drag number was not very good on it. But the one thing that was good about that race car, and the wind tunnel told us, is when you yawed it, when you turned it, the drag did not go up. And the racetrack backed it up because the thing never lost RPMs in the corner. And it was back then, we didn't know why. Because we put quarter panels and fenders on, like, that's good, right there, put it right there. We had no idea why. But it's almost like we got down there, and the deeper we got into Speed Week, the slicker that track got, the better that car was. And by the time we got to the dual race on Thursday, we won it, hands down, running away. And we lost an engine actually on Saturday and had to put a fresh engine in on race morning and start that race. But I knew.
Did you have to go to the rear for that back then?
Back then you did. We used to change engines.
That's
like
right.
we changed tires back then. In fact, at
Daytona,
Daytona, we probably changed engines more than we changed tires. So no, you didn't have to go to the rear. We started on the second row by virtue of winning the dual race. And it became evident to me in that race, they can't beat us unless we beat ourselves. Car was good. Dale was Dale at Daytona. And we had this caution that came out with about 20 or 25 to go. And I made the call to do right sides only, which most of the leaders did. We came in leading, we left leading. And I knew if nothing happens that she should be able to secure this deal. But the one moment about that whole weekend after winning that race, it was like a blur. I mean, it really was. I mean, people ask me about what do I remember about the assembly line, receiving line.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. I mean, I know it happened and I see it now, but I had no idea it was going on because I think I was almost in a little bit of a state of shock. But the one thing that was so special to me is in Victory Lane. Yeah, again, it was special to me, but it was my second time. But I remember after things were kind of settling down and still taking pictures, and the car had already left and went to the garage area for inspection, I remember almost taking a step back and watching Dale and Teresa Earnhardt, and quite honestly, watching Richard and Judy Childers. It was their first win.
That's right.
It was almost like watching your kids open presents on Christmas. I could see how special it was to them. But the funny thing, I leave Victory Lane. They do this car wash with Dale and Richard and I, the Bill France Jr. suite to the Unical suite. I finally get back down to the garage. And of course, that was back, they still do it. They rip that car apart. Then you have to put it back together because it goes into what was then Daytona, USA. We finally loaded that car about 11 o'clock that night into a little trailer, and it was pouring down rain. And I was down there by myself. Linda and the kids were going to go down, but they were all homesick with the flu. So I remember walking out to our motorhome and walked in the door and sat down to take my shoes off. Now, this is probably 7 hours maybe after the checkered flag. And I went to take my shoes off and I went, damn, we just won the Daytona 500. It didn't even resonate to me until that moment.
I believe that, like when you win something and there's so much you can't even really describe it to people that don't know because you're pulled in, I don't know, a million directions. And like, I remember when I won Daytona last year, until I got back home off the plane and I took the guys to Waffle House and all that, and we had fun. But until I was with Nicole alone driving to the house, I'm like, holy smokes. Like, you know what we just did today? And you're sitting there, and at this point, it feels like it's been 10 years to get to that night. And you're like, the race was, 8-9 hours ago. I woke up this morning not knowing I was going to be a Daytona winner. And you're just, I don't know. I have this, it's just running through your mind all day. But it's so cool to hear because, I like that you had that moment going back to your motorhome because we all have had that. And you're just finally alone or with your other half, and you just kind of reflect on it.
Well, and I also remember I knew how Dale downplayed.
Well,
he downplayed about winning that race.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Was where was his mindset? Was he still confident he could do it?
No doubt.
That's what.
Because two things. Dale was notorious at Daytona and Talladega. In practice, he wanted to be the first at the gate when they opened the gate, and he would leave the garage out on pit road, and he'd make a 20-lap run and just have cars lined up behind him. And finally, about halfway through the week, I said, Dale, how about if we get back in the pack in one of these practice sessions and see what we've got? He said, I don't plan on being back in the pack. Okay, pal.
I love it.
I'm in the boat with you, but I better not hear crap about this car being loose or tight in traffic because we hadn't been there in practice. But the other thing, when they fired the engines and Danny Lawrence, who always snapped his window net, Dale did that like that. And he had a way when he wanted to tell you something, he'd pull your collar. He pulled my collar. He said, you just get me close to the front at the end of this thing, and whoever's leading, their good day's going to go bad.
So to me, that is so cool because and I appreciate you sharing that, because a driver to his crew chief or crew guy that's not on the radio, like those moments are stuff that nobody knows about, but we all, like, we do it. I love my crew chief, Eddie, I get to work with now, and we have our stuff that we talk about that no one knows about, but that's something you'll never forget. Like, and that sums up Dale to me of what I think. Like, I love that attitude because he's like, we're going to get it done.
There was one other really unique, funny thing that happened. I know we need to move on to something else, but I got to share this with you. That had it went to full fruition, there's a good chance I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you because I probably wouldn't be in NASCAR right now. So when I went to work at RCR at the beginning of 97 and we got ready to go to that first race, the 97 500, Richard Childress told me, he said, I need to tell you something. He said, Bill France Jr. has one of our radios. And every once in a while, under caution, he will talk to Dale. They had a great relationship. They were close friends. Like, okay, no big deal. Well, we didn't accomplish a lot in 97, and there was no reason for Bill France Jr. probably to talk to Dale under caution. So I totally had forgotten about it. Never thought another thing about it. That caution I mentioned, last caution where we did the 2 tires, we go back out leading, they're behind the case. And I'm telling you right then, if you'd have thumped me, I'd have probably just crumbled. That's how uptight I was, because now we're going to go back racing with about 15, 16 laps to go. Well, we're waiting on the one to go. And like I say, I'm uptight, just over the top. And all of a sudden, I hear on our radio, hey, Sunday Money, this is Captain Jack. And I went, who the hell is Captain Jack on our radio? And Richard saw the look on my face and went, no, Captain Jack. I went, oh, Captain Jack. I was about ready to cuss Captain Jack out, whoever he was.
I love it.
But fortunately, Richard saw I was about to have a come apart, and he went, no, Captain Jack. And I went, okay. And all he said, again, they had these boats that go hang in the Bahamas, and Dale called him Captain Jack. And Bill Jr. called Dale Sunday Money, which was the name of his boat. He said, hey, Sunday Money, this is Captain Jack. What you want, Captain Jack? He said, I think it's time for you to go snag that big one.
That's awesome, because I did the Fox booth yesterday for the ARCA race, and I called down to Cletus and said it was the Bean up there, and people were tweeting that like it's like memories of and I didn't realize that's where the Captain Jack thing came from. So I know we're running out of time, but I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to kind of just ask you them all together, and you can answer as many as you want or however you think. So I had on here best leaders in the garage, but I'm going to throw that into like most talented and best work ethic that you worked with. Like if you had to pick somebody,
like a driver,
anybody, it could be a driver and a crew guy, or
I'm going to say an owner, and Robert Yates.
Man, that's awesome.
Robert Yates taught me so much about winning, losing, and just life in general. And a lot of the things that I still try to live by today came from what Robert Yates installed in me. And the biggest thing he taught me and hammered on me all the time is the person or the people that embrace change. That's the people that will prevail, or the group that will prevail. So
is that how you assembled a team? Like when you were looking for people, like if as a crew chief, if you were, I don't know how much you had involvement in assembling the team.
Back then, the crew chief, we didn't have competition directors. We didn't have team managers as a crew chief and the guys. But to me, if somebody came in there, I listened closely to their questions. And if the first few questions had anything to do with how much I'm going to make and what hours do we work, that was two big red flags to me. Not that those things aren't important, but I wanted somebody that went, what can I do to help you make this team better?
That's right.
You know, I wanted to hear somebody that, yeah,
They had a fire in
making
them.
your living and time with your family, those things are important. I'm not discounting those, but people that came in and asked the questions about what are we going to do to be better? What can I do to make this team better? That's the person that got my attention.
I love that. Couple more here. This should be a easy one, but did you ever want to be a car owner during any of that? Did you think about going that route?
I did. And it's funny because you just talked about, and you're driving now for Dodge, who came back as a manufacturer in the Craftsman Truck Series. In 2004, Toyota came to the Craftsman Truck Series, and they were going to do 4 organizations, 2 teams per organization. And they wanted kind of 2 existing organizations, but they were trying to start 2 new organizations. And there was a gentleman, a young guy out of the New Jersey area by the name of Alex Meshkin. And he was a race fan, but he had money. And he somehow, some way got in touch with me and started having conversations. Can we figure out how to do one of these Toyota teams? And him and I flew to Costa Mesa, California, and met with Lee White that just passed away, and Jim Ost with Toyota. And we met with them, and I'm thinking, hey, ain't no way. We don't even have a screwdriver, much less, all we got's a burning desire. And I got a call about 2 months after we went out there and said, we're going to award you guys with 2 teams.
Wow.
And I was co-owner, but him and I had such different philosophies that it didn't work out. And the biggest philosophy is he didn't want to pay his bills. And I told him,
I'd heard about
I
that.
love this. This is a great opportunity. Because I kept telling him, Toyota's going cup racing. And if we just take care of business, we can stay on this journey with them. But if we don't take care of business, we're not. And I said, I've worked for 30 years to build credibility in this garage, and I'm not going to let you tear it down. And I walked away.
That's awesome, because I can relate. Like, I'm kind of in that position now, you know, with Ram and everything and the potential of Dodge. So it's really cool.
I look where Toyota's at today. It makes me want to cry. Just cry.
Man. All right. If you had one piece of advice that you've learned through your career at being successful to give to me or anybody in the sport, one thing, top of your head.
Boy, that's hard to say just one thing. It really is. But just be committed, be dedicated, and don't give up. You know, no matter if somebody tells you that's not possible. I always like to take the word impossible and slide it apart and go, I'm possible.
No quit.
Yeah,
I love it.
No matter what you do, no matter how bleak it looks, just if you believe in it, just keep digging.
So on my show, this is kind of a podcast that started in a spare bedroom, but Brandon has made me look a lot better than I am. But anyways, my motto, man, through my late model career, grinding it out to get here, I always end the show because trust the process has been my thing. We call it TTP. All my crew guys like live by it. Every text I get is TTP, trust the process.
I like that.
Because it was a low grip racetrack one time. I dropped from the pole to the back, saving tires, and we had a crew guy named Chad who didn't think it would work. And I remember pulling him, telling him, trust the process. And that's what we did. And I'd come back and win the race.
Mm-hmm.
I did it a lot of times. And man, we had that fire of trust the process. So I always ask my guests, what in your career, and I think I kind of know because we kind of talked about what you went through with the loss of Davey and all that, but what is your trust the process moment of your career that you just had to go, like, it's going to work out. Like, I say it literally is trust the process. You just know in your heart, this is it. Maybe when you loaded your Pinto up and left, like that
definitely would be on the list, but it probably goes back to my Robert Yates education. Robert just always told me the group of people or the person that embraces change, that's the people that will prevail. So in 1993, I talked about that win at Charlotte with Ernie, where we led 328 of 334 laps. Back in the early 90s, we would get rules changes from NASCAR weekly. You'd get a fax, not an email. We didn't have email back then. You had fax machine. We'd get a fax Tuesday, Wednesday. Here's what we're changing this week. And it may not be for the garage area. This is what the Fords are going to have to do this week. This is what the Chevrolets. So they made a decision right before that Charlotte race, and we had this car that was a bad to the bone car anytime we took it to intermediate. If we took it to Charlotte, Atlanta, Pocono, Michigan, same deal. Only people could beat us if we beat ourselves. NASCAR came out with a rule. They called it the 5 and 5 rule. They cut the valence off 5 inches off the ground and cut the spoiler down to 5 inches, took a ton of downforce. And I lost my flipping mind.
Yeah.
And Robert said, stop. We're going to figure this out. We're going to go to the wind tunnel, and we're going to figure it out. And sure enough, we went to Lockheed down in Atlanta, spent a graveyard shift in the wind tunnel, found some downforce back, and as I said, went out there and sat on the outside, the front row, and the only 6 laps we didn't lead was through the cycle of green flag stops.
That's a pretty good trust process, man, because we get worked up.
Now, I was questioning trust in the process, but I didn't give up on it.
I always did too, right? But it always.
I don't know if this is going to work.
I always did, and it would always work out. And so I know we got to get you to the Fox booth, but I wanted to say one of the coolest things I seen you tweet along the way was your notes of the setups.
Yeah,
I love that stuff because I have all my notes from my late model days. It looks about the same, right? Just on a piece of paper in a book. So I never got on the laptop stuff and all that, but I can't thank you enough for coming on here. And man, there's so much more we could have dove into. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2 down the road, but I just appreciate your time and effort. I appreciate getting to know you over the last year or so, working with obviously your son Brandon.
Yep.
He does so much for me, and you did a good job. Good job keeping Brandon straight growing up, because he's awesome. And
well, his mom gets most of the credit for that.
And I loved meeting her and you and getting to hang out with y'all at the Christmas party. But I really appreciate you coming down here on a busy Sunday, and I know B Nation's gonna love it. So thank you.
Well, I was excited when Brandon asked me about do it, and I do want to say this to you, and I'm not saying this because you and I are sitting here together, because I've told Brandon the same thing, getting to know you and meeting you several times. You mentioned earlier you would love to have met Davey Allison. I can tell you for a fact that you are walking a lot in his footsteps in many ways. Wow. One, you're smart, you're talented, but you get it. And that was the biggest thing that Davey did a phenomenal job inside that race car, obviously, but he did even a better job outside the race car. He understood that these fans, they're the most important element of our sport. If we don't have them, we're all back working in junkyards, or you're working in a port. And you know what? You get it. You understand that this part's is just as important what you do in that truck.
Well, I don't even know what to say other than that. That gives me goosebumps, because that is one of the coolest compliments.
Well, I speak the truth. And I speak the truth.
And I didn't pay him to say that. No, I'm just kidding. But I really appreciate that, because it means a lot. And if I can carry on a little bit of excitement that somebody like you can look at and go, man, that reminds me of him, and I can do that for the sport. I love it. And I know I'm not here without the fans. And I mean, that's why the podcast is literally the B Nation podcast, because without them, I probably don't have the brand thing going. And I think that's partially what's helped keep me or get me here, so, and I don't forget that, because at the end of the day, I'm just one of them that got a lucky opportunity to be on this side,
Well, I know sponsors and owners dictate a lot of it, but maybe I'm not going to say if you get the cup, when you get the cup. I
love that.
Maybe you can have that 28 number back on track.
I would push for it. It would be a really cool thing, and I would take a lot of pride in it. I can tell you that. So, man, thank you so much, Larry. Appreciate it.